All right, hello everyone. My name is Agridas. My paper that I'm writing for this class is going to be over acupuncture and whether it is fact or fiction. So the main question here is, what is acupuncture? So when you hear acupuncture or think of the practice, these may be some images that come to mind. I know they were for me, um, but in talking in terms of context for myself, I really not have an understanding of what acupuncture was and the reason for why they did it or how it even came about. So doing this research, I was able to answer all those questions and dive a little deeper into what exactly is acupuncture and what makes or what gives it its significance. All right. So the origin of acupuncture is actually of Chinese origin. There was not many early document or um, well documented documentations of it. However, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine was the first document to describe and organize a system of diagnosis and treatment which is recognized as acupuncture. It was believed to be predominantly a compilation of traditions handed down over centuries. Now, the basis of this document is in Taoist philosophy, and what Taoist philosophy is it is a focus on universal, holistic, and peaceful principles such as living in harmony with nature and the natural order of things. This text was written around 100 BCE, and BCE is actually the same time reference to BC. The only difference between the two is that BCE avoids acknowledging Christ as Lord. So, like I said, same year, same time difference, just avoids a reference to Christianity. So, acupuncture itself was a standard therapy in ancient China, along with many other things such as herbs, massage, diet, and moxibustion. Now, moxibustion is the practice of burning dried mugwort, which is an aromatic plant, on particular points of the body with an intent to warm and invigorate the flow of qi in the body. And we'll talk more about qi later and what it is. And the goal was to dispel certain pathogenic influences. Now, it's important to note that in China, knowledge of health and illness predominantly came from observation or observation of living subjects, as dissection was forbidden and the subject of anatomy did not exist at the time. All right, so for a little more continuation of history, interest in acupuncture actually saw a decline in China after the 17th century and onward, as it came to be regarded as a superstitious and irrational practice. It was excluded from the Medical Institute by the emperor in 1822. However, knowledge was retained from academic interest um, in the practice and by rural healers, as this was one of the only methods of healing that was easily accessible in such areas. Now, just like many other places, Western medicine did begin to have an influence. It started around the 20th century, and the influence was so heavy that acupuncture actually became outlawed in 1929 due to the fact that it started to become heavily shamed and not accepted by the public. It was also outlawed with other forms of what is considered to be traditional medicine or traditional Chinese medicine. However, even after this outlaw, there were times when there were not a lot of times. There was a time when acupuncture came back into existence. I believe it was under the Mao um, ruling time period. However, he himself did not have actual acupuncture done on him, even when he was ill. It was also brought back due to the fact that it gave basic healing techniques to areas that did not have access to the higher techniques. Um, However, acupuncture did begin to spread to other parts of the world as many people were fascinated with it and how it works. Um, but a lot of people also wanted to seek what they consider to be a real medical and scientific explanation behind it, as they weren't convinced by what they saw at the time. So now what we're going to look at is, how does acupuncture work? So when looking at the basics, there are really three terms you need to know. There's channels, which are referred to as meridians in text. There's a life force and energy, which is referred to as chi in text, and then there's acupuncture points, which are referred to as acupoints in text. In a simplified form, chi, the energy and life force that was believed to run through your body, it runs through in these meridians, and the acupuncture points are what allow you to access this chi through the meridians. In terms of how many acupoints there are, I wasn't able to come up across a concrete number. It fluctuated a lot. However, I did see a lot surfacing around 265. Some texts reference up to 2,000. So a range of 365 up to 2,000 is what I settled on. Now, the concept of imbalance between yin and yang is actually important here because in ancient Chinese times, imbalance between yin and yang was seen to be the difference between health and illness. As these forces are seen as contemporary to each other, the imbalance of the two can cause more harm than good. So, if we're going to look at qi flowing correctly versus qi flowing incorrectly, it was believed that if you have good physical and mental health, your qi was flowing correctly. If the qi was flowing incorrectly, it would result in illness. So the idea between acupuncture and the practice as a whole was that if you inserted needles into the acupoints, it would alter the flow of the qi, and as a result, bring the energy flow back into balance. Now, common uses of acupuncture from what I saw were to be to assess pain in the lower back, the neck, in cases such as osteoarthritis, which is actually in the bottom picture here, where you can see the muscle between joints is degrading, which leads to knee pain. Headaches and migraines were also seen to be common reasons for why acupuncture would be used. Now, what is the debate? So the main question that I want to examine at and look at here is if is acupuncture a real and credible treatment? Those that are on the yes side that it is, one, feel that the current scientific evidence that has been displayed as a result of clinical trials is enough to back the practice of acupuncture and whether it's credible or not. Two, those who have had acupuncture done and a condition cured by it are also on this yes side that it is a credible treatment. Third, natives of China, where the practice originated, also believe it is a credible treatment due to their culture as well as the practices being passed down over centuries to treat certain conditions. Now, on the no side, there are also three main points here. It is that those on this side don't feel there's enough scientific evidence backing, or the evidence behind the practice is not enough. Two, they feel the practice is more based on belief than science, and therefore they need more to really convince them. Three, the outside world is the main people who are really saying that we don't know if this is credible enough. We're trying to look into what ancient Chinese culture and history has said and see if we can make sense scientifically more than just belief. Now, these current research findings are complete yet, as I'm still researching, still writing a paper, but these are some of the main things that I've found. One, the nervous system is in Western society seen as the mediator for the acupuncture points. Western doctors attribute the effects of acupunctures to placebos, similar as taking a placebo pill and any trials you've seen where they've looked into the placebo effect. One of the main interesting things that I noticed was that in many journal articles and reports, they referenced MRI scans, and it was concluded that there is indeed induced brain activity from acupuncture. However, it's in different areas of the brain. For one, in the hypothalamus and the nucleus accumbens, the first is responsible for the nervous system, and the second is responsible for the ward system. Both of these were seen as being activated during acupuncture. The anterior cingulate cortex was also seen as being active, and this organ in the brain has to do with empathy, impulse control, and emotions. Now, there were also parts of the brain that were seen as being deactivated during acupuncture. And a lot of these were in the limbic system, which has to do with the emotions and behavior processing. one of the organs being the, I believe it's pronounced amygdala, responsible for emotional behavior, mainly processing fear. The hippocampus, which is mainly responsible for memory, was also deactivated during this. So I found those two findings interesting, and I plan to look more into those to see a little more in depth on maybe why they were activated or deactivated. Um, I know in terms of the nervous system, a lot of Western um, science and medicine saw the needles as activation points for stimulating the nervous system and triggering certain transmitters. So that's another finding that I saw in terms of Western medicine trying to make sense of acupuncture. Now, there were some clinical trials I looked at, predominantly with oncology patients, those being tumor patients, and looking at how acupuncture was able to reduce or increase control over the symptoms that they had. A lot of these symptoms revolved around pain, gastrointestinal side effects, hot flashes, shortness of breath, fatigue, anxiety, depression, insomnia. A lot of times, acupuncture was either helped reduce these, or in some cases, didn't really have too much of effect. But I saw more reduce and control than actually increase. So there is some belief here that these practices may be credible. Now, in terms of cancer patients specifically, they have also seen a benefits in pain releases, or not pain releases, but in relief of pain. A lot of it was through RCT trials, which is randomly controlled trial in which they implemented the placebo. Um, However, in other trials, they were said to not have found many results. But again, I'm going to look back and see if I can find more of if there's more credible, if there's more results from acupuncture than no results. Now, when looking at things I have to continue to research, 'cause like I said, I'm still researching a lot because there's a lot to dive in here in terms of Western medicine and scientific research they've done from clinical trials, and then Chinese history and a lot of the texts there. Now, I'm going to look more into clinical trials of acupuncture. There is a lot out there that I want to pick through. I'm going to look specifically at cancer and other serious conditions because, like I said earlier, a lot of acupuncture is used for smaller things such as headaches, knee pain. But I want to see if there's more implementation of this at a more serious condition level, and if implementing this procedure has helped more than other typical Western practices. Going off of that, I'm also going to look at the symptoms that respond to the treatment. Like I said earlier, they saw some people saw reduced fatigue, shortness of breath, hot flushes, and I want to see if there are more symptoms outside of that that respond to acupuncture treatment. I'm going to continue to look at the background and claims. As like I said, a lot of the research done on acupuncture is from outside of China. It's the outside world looking in, trying to make sense of Chinese history, culture, and practices. And I think it's important to also learn more from the other side and see if I can find more about where it originated from and what other things they may have used it for, and compare it to what Western or West not Western medium, but Western practices have done in clinical trials. I want to look at testimonies, see what people have had acupuncture done for what conditions and what they've experienced from it, because I feel that having those firsthand views are valuable in this type of thing. And then I'm going to look at the use of acupuncture for other nations, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of nations took back what they learned from China, whether it be through missionaries, whether it be through historical voyages in, and I tried to make sense of it. I want to see how other nations implemented acupuncture into their culture and what it did for them, and I want to compare it back to China and the rest of the world as well. So this is what I have. This is what I have so far, and what my paper is going to be over. But I hope to be able to fine tune it a lot more, find some more in-depth details, and come up with a really concrete answer on whether acupuncture really is a credible treatment or not for certain conditions.